Ready? Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Farnworth, Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General for British Columbia. First, I'd like to acknowledge we're on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples, in which we're grateful to be able to work and reside on their land. Last Friday, on the advice of Dr. Bonnie Henry, I announced that we have created an order under the Emergency Program Act to prohibit non-essential travel within British Columbia until 12:01 on May 25th. That means you need to stay within your regional zone for the next several weeks. These defined regions are the combined Fraser and Vancouver Coastal Health Authority regions, the combined Northern and Interior Health Authority regions, and the Vancouver Island Health Authority. Those traveling for essential reasons, such as, but not limited to, moving to a new residence, going to work, receiving or assisting someone to receive healthcare services, and traveling for emergencies, will not be impacted by these restrictions. And in addition to the previous order, we've added two new reasons for essential travel. First, for the purpose of avoiding the risk of abuse or violence, and second, to expand who can visit to long-term care and assisted living facilities to include social visits, in addition to essential visitors. A full list of reasons for essential travel can be found in the news release and on our website. Now, I would like to take a moment to recognize and thank the vast majority of British Columbians who are doing their part. In particular, I want to thank BC Ferries, hotels, and all of our partners in the tourism sector for working closely with us to help their visitors cancel or rebook their reservations. And to the RCMP and all law enforcement for their contributions and hard work on the front line during this pandemic. And I'm happy to say we're beginning to see impacts of the travel restrictions that we put in place last Friday. We're hearing from communities that this has already had an impact. Travel on BC ferries was down this past weekend, and resorts and hotels are reporting that many people have taken the initiative to cancel or rebook their holiday plans until the restrictions are lifted. While travel within your health authority region is not legally restricted, the message is still clear. Stay local. Don't travel from Victoria to the Comox Valley or Kelowna to the Kootenays. If you have to ask, you shouldn't go. Government committed to the public that police will enforce these travel restrictions through the use of counterattack style road checks. Within this new order, effective immediately, road checks can be set up on highway corridors that connect different regional zones of the order. But you will not see road checks in downtown Vancouver or along Boundary Road. Once stopped at a road check, drivers may be asked to provide the driver's name, address, and driver's license, and any available documentation regarding the driver's name and address, for example, secondary identification that confirms driver's residential address if you've recently moved, and the purpose of driver's travel. Documentation regarding travel will not be required, and passengers in the vehicle are also not required to provide this information. If police have reasonable grounds to believe you are about to leave your regional zone or are already traveling outside of your health authority for non-essential purposes, they can direct you to stay within your region or to leave the authority at that time. Failure to comply with the requirements at a road check or the direction given by a police officer may result in a $230 fine. Violating the travel order is a $575 fine. The primary goal of these road checks is to educate and deter people from traveling for non-essential reasons. I know that there have been concerns raised about police being given broad sweeping powers and the impacts this could have on many British Columbians, particularly the potential to disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, and racialized and vulnerable communities. And I want to ensure all British Columbians that we have been listening to these concerns. I want to be clear. There is no authority for pedestrians to be stopped on the streets or for arbitrary inspections or investigations to be conducted by police. These enforcement orders apply to the site where the road checks are taking place. And to be clear, police are not authorized to record personal information unless an enforcement action is taken. This means that police will only record information if a driver is in violation of the order. While these restrictions are in place, we'll continue and listen to feedback to make sure we get it right. The intent of this order is not punishment, but rather to educate around travel. Spreading this message will continue to be more important than giving out tickets. Our goal will be to encourage behavior that helps limit unnecessary travel and, as a consequence, transmissions, and to protect us all from the spread of COVID-19. These restrictions we have implemented are unprecedented, yet so are the challenges we face during this pandemic. We're happy that most British Columbians are continuing to do the right thing, and we need to work together to get through the next coming weeks. As we've been saying, you need to stay local. Our top priority right now is the health and safety of all British Columbians, and prohibiting travel outside of your community will help to limit the spread of COVID-19. At this time, more than 38% of British Columbians have had their first dose of vaccination, and we are on track to 60% by the 25th of May. Hunkering down and staying local is what we all must do right now, so we can work to a summer that looks more like the kind that we're used to. We need to hold the line for now, and we'll get through this. So thank you. And I can now take questions.
Thank you, Minister. A reminder to reporters on the line to please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Our first question today is from Binder Sajan of CTV. Binder, please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. I'm just wondering, we've heard from some police departments that they don't have the authority to conduct these checks. And I'm wondering, does this mean that it will only be the police that are responsible for highway checks that are going to be conducting this style of enforcement?
The only police that will be conducting checks are the provincial RCMP. We've been working with the RCMP at E Division, and it will be and the only checks that will be set up will be those that are authorized by E Division and that dedicated traffic unit that will be dealing with that. We are not, as I've said a number of times, asking for any checks. In Vancouver, for example, or in Burnaby, or in Ferny, or in Kelowna, or in Prince George. It will be a dedicated unit, that has been brought together by the provincial RCMP, and it will be the E Division that will be authorizing where those checks take place.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I'm wondering if the province is providing more funding or resources to allow RCMP to do this.
Yes, we are. The province has indicated right from the get-go that we will be providing the resources for these checks to take place.
All right. Our next question is from Richard Zussman of Global News. Richard, please go ahead.
Minister, last week the National Police Federation said this about the orders, that they believe that these put their members at risk of public backlash, legal ambiguity, and risk of exposure and possible infection of COVID-19. What have you done over the last week to address these concerns?
Well, I can tell you there have been a number of things that have taken place. As I said when we announced the first order, that we would be working very closely with the RCMP in terms of the implementation of this order. The order has been drafted in such a way as to ensure that, one, it's constitutional. Two, we have ensured that the checks will only be conducted by authorized police officers, and that is so you've got a team that's been put together through E Division. Those will be the only checks that take place. They will have to be put in place in a safe area that's safe for both police and for the public, as well as for a vehicle to be turned around if one is if that's what has to happen. And so I think we've worked very hard to ensure the safety of everybody. I would also point out that police are in a priority group in terms of getting vaccinated, and that I know that more than 2,000 RCMP officers have already been vaccinated.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
On that piece of vaccination you mentioned, there are still police officers and RCMP not vaccinated. So is there a guarantee that those participating in these road checks will be vaccinated? And another point, Dr. Henry yesterday said people should not be traveling to the Sunshine Coast and the Sea to Sky Highway, but that's not against the law. Why not put in enforcement to ensure that people do not travel to these regions that have clearly expressed concern about travel, especially from that Metro Vancouver health region that they are designated in?
First, the RCMP we've worked very closely with. They will be establishing a dedicated enforcement unit that will deal with the road checks, and so they're the ones who are organizing that, and I'm very pleased in the way in which that's being done. The second point regarding the Sea to Sky. The travel advisory is still in place. Don't travel to those areas. Even if you live in the Lower Mainland, the Mayor of Whistler has asked people not to go to the community. So the advice that Dr. Henry has given is in place. If there needs to be changes, then obviously we would work with the provincial health officer if additional measures need to be taken in place. And so obviously we're going to be monitoring the situation.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Justine Hunter from the Globe and Mail. Justine, please go ahead.
Thank you. Minister Farnworth, the Prime Minister said today that Ontario is asking the federal government to suspend the arrival of international students. I know we're talking about travel within BC today, but in terms of that kind of travel from outside the province, is that something that BC is interested in?
What I can tell you right now is that we already have a quarantine and self-isolation procedures in place when it comes to the arrival of international students. Obviously, if there's changes that are going to take place that are put in place by the federal government, we would want to work with the federal government on that. But what I can tell you that since the start of the pandemic, that is something, given the number of international students that come to British Columbia, we monitor very closely, and we have had those quarantine and self-isolation restrictions in place for quite some time in BC.
Justine, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thanks. I'm just wondering if you think, though, given the concerns that have been expressed about the, how efficient these quarantine programs have been imposed, is it something that is on the table in terms of what BC would be looking for, or are you satisfied that Ottawa has improve the quarantine program that it's administering?
We've had a pretty rigorous program in place here in British Columbia, but we have made it clear to Ottawa that we want to ensure that when people do arrive in this country, that they are following the quarantine procedures, that they are being followed up on, and that those areas that the feds are responsible for, that they follow through on. As you know, here in British Columbia, we set up and got the feds to start the first checks and quarantining and requiring plans, people to have plans when they are coming into British Columbia, and it was staffed by the province at the very beginning, and then the feds took that over. So we are very mindful of this, and will continue to ensure that there is rigorous quarantining that's required here in British Columbia, and that we will continue to work with the feds on that.
All right, our next question comes from Tanya Fletcher of CBC. Tanya, please go ahead.
Minister, so these checkpoints will be periodic still, we understand. Will they target high traffic times, or will they be at random times? And will motorists be given any advance warning of their locations, similar to the way is done with photo radar sometimes? And lastly, who's providing enforcement then at the BC ferry terminals? You mentioned it'll all be RCMP now and not, say, Delta?
No, thank you for that. And so in the case of ferry terminals, the enforcement has been in place, and that will continue as is, and I think it's been working very effectively in terms of Delta and West Vancouver, and then the RCMP obviously on the island, in Nanaimo and at Schwartz Bay. In regards to your first question, so the RCMP will make the decisions on where the road checks will take place. As I've said, they will be at those high traffic corridors, and the obvious one, obviously, is the number one, where it goes into the interior to the Canyon route, the Coquihalla and the Hope Princeton. What I can also tell you is that motorists will be warned well ahead of the road check. There will be signage going up, in fact, throughout the province, reminding people essential travel only. But let's say, for example, you're going up the number one and you're driving along, you will start to see signs that say there is a road check up ahead, and that will be, you know, several kilometers before you actually get to the road check. So you actually will, one, have plenty of warning, but also you'll be able to turn around if you realize, you know what, maybe my travel's not that essential. So there will be plenty of advance notice in that regard.
And Tanya, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, please, thanks. Does this address concerns from some RCMP officers that they'd be crossing an unwanted line and having to make subjective decisions around whose travel should be deemed essential? You said in your opening remarks, if police have reasonable grounds to believe you're traveling for non-essential purposes, but is there specific criteria like the union had been calling for, rather than putting the onus on them to be responsible for making a judgment call?
Well, first off, there's a significant list of what is considered essential travel. Police will only be required or will be asking questions of the driver, not of the passengers. Passengers will not, as I said, have to provide documentation. And the police do have discretion. And we've worked this out with the RCMP. They are confident and comfortable with the measures that are being put in place. And we think that it will work effectively, because I think at the end of the day, most people want to do the right thing and will do the right thing.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Moira Witten of the Tyee. Moira, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Minister, for taking my question. I'm wondering if you can provide a little bit more clarity on the Black, Indigenous, and racialized community organizations you consulted with. I know you said some of those were private in your briefing last week, but I understand there was a subsequent letter from the UBCIC and other organizations saying none were consulted. I'm just wondering if any of those questions around whether these road checks will be used to target people with precarious migration status, or there are questions around, how that discretion might disproportionately impact racialized people has been addressed directly.
I have met with representatives of racialized groups, and I can tell you that we have had, I think, good conversations. And in fact, out of those conversations have come, I believe, some improvements in terms of how the process will work. This is not about, as I said in my remarks, this is not about targeting people. Police will not have the ability to randomly stop people. Information is, unless there is an offense, is not being gathered and collected. So we have made sure that we've been very clear on that in the order and in terms of the instructions.
And Moira, do you have a follow-up?
I do, thank you. These orders were announced, I think, just over or about 2 weeks ago, and we're only now getting details. Are you concerned that some of the confusion might be decreasing public trust when it's needed most, or that, potentially people may take the fact that they can still travel from Abbotsford to Whistler or to Bowen Island, for example, as kind of reason that this behavior can continue? I'm just curious about whether you think the rollout has been strong enough for the message you're trying to send.
Right from the beginning, we've made it clear this is about public health and protecting public health and stopping the spread of the virus. It's about restricting travel. It's been put in place on the advice of the provincial health officer, and that's how we're making those decisions. And we've seen, I think, a real response from the public. This past weekend, ferry traffic was down on average of 30%. Foot passenger traffic was down 40%. That speaks volumes, I think. At the same time, I can tell you that in the BC Park system, we've had about 5,000 cancellations and rebookings from people who said, you know what, now is not the time for us to go on a trip out of our area. So I think people do get it, and they do understand, and they have been responding. And we will continue to drive home the message that just because you're in your health authority doesn't mean you go from Abbotsford to Whistler. It means you stay local. I mean, I've got a nephew, a grandnephew who's 2 years old. I haven't seen him, and I haven't seen his little brother, who's a year old. He lives in Abbotsford. But that's not local when you live in Port Coquitlam. And so people need to be mindful of that. And at the same time, the restrictions that we are putting in place at the request of the provincial health officer are to prohibit travel outside of your health region, and it's to stop the spread of this virus. And I think people understand that.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rob Monroe of Info News. Rob, please go ahead.
Yes, Minister. I'm just wondering how this works if I'm in Kelowna and if I'm going to be stopped at Hope. When do I get a $230 fine if I don't comply versus do I just drive through and they pull me over again, give me the $575 fine? How are these going to be enforced?
You don't get to just drive through. If you are given a ticket, the police will direct you to turn around and to return to your health authority or your home. It's and the police are fully trained and professional and know how to deal with these kinds of situations. But it's not a question of saying, "Oh, I'll take the ticket and continue on my way." It doesn't work that way.
And Rob, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, and I'm just concerned about the fact that you're not checking passengers. I mean, I could drive down there and say I'm going to see my grandmother in long-term care in Chilliwack, and I've got 6 buddies crammed in to go to a party there. Why not talk to the passengers as well?
One of the things when I said last week in terms of why we were taking our time to ensure that we are getting our order right was to make sure that we have we have the right constitutional advice, that we've got the right legal services advice. And it is on that advice that this order was developed. And the most and the best way is that it is the driver is the one who will be asked the questions, and that's why it's been constructed this way. It also deals with concerns about groups that have racialized groups, for example. That was a concern that's been raised, and so we've done it on the best advice available to us. And at that time, I said we want to make sure we do it right, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Craig McCullough of KNKX Radio. Craig, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Follow-up to Moira's question. Minister, what type of discussions have you had with these racialized communities in the past week? I know last week you talked about your initial meetings. What type of follow-up in the last 7 days have you had with them?
It was to outline the measures that we were looking at to put in place, to also communicate that some of the issues that they had raised, we wanted to make sure that they understood that some of those concerns would be addressed by the fact that what they were concerned about was in fact not going to take place. So it was as much about telling them what the order was not as opposed to what it is.
Craig, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do, and you just kind of very nicely led into it. If you can provide some more details, what were their main concerns? In detail, you kind of lightly touched on it. If you can give more details, much appreciated.
Yeah, so one of the one is this going to be used as an opportunity to gather information and to record information? And the answer to that question is no, it is not. Would it involve, unless of course there is an offense, would it involve random stops, for example? And the answer on that is no, it is not about random stops, that the only checkpoints that would be able to be put in place, for example, are those that are authorized by the RCMP, that is being coordinated and done through E-Division. And so that's another example. Plus, what we also are going to be doing is ensuring that in many of the ethnic communities, language papers, radio, for example, that we are communicating the order in languages that people are able to understand.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rob Buffum of CTV Vancouver Island. Rob, please go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my question. My question, Minister, relates to a situation we've learned about where someone from Victoria booked an Airbnb for the May long weekend up in the Okanagan. The orders came in subsequent to that, and so they did their good duty as they're required to do and cancel, or tried to cancel. But the Airbnb operator said, no, we won't give you a full refund. And when they contacted Airbnb itself, they said, no, you're out of luck. So I'm wondering, what's your message to this Airbnb operator who is not giving someone a full refund, even though they're trying to follow these orders? And what's your message generally on this front?
We've been working very closely with the tourism sector, including Airbnb. And I think that this individual needs to recognize that this order is in place for 5 weeks. It's there to protect the health of British Columbians. It's to ensure that over the longer term that businesses are going to be able to operate as we vaccinate the population of this province. We're at 38% now. If we get to 60%, we're going to see that's going to have a real impact on the pressure in the hospitals, and that is going to allow us to hopefully to ease the restrictions. I think that individual needs to take a really hard look at themselves in the mirror and go, some short-term greed at the expense of, one, the reputation of your business, because I guarantee you that people will put that under their reviews, and to go, you know what, to look and say, am I part of the problem, or should I really be part of the solution, which is to recognize we're all in this together, and that for the next 5 weeks, when someone's canceling a booking, they get a full refund, because then they're going to come back. And what they've done now is probably lost a customer and an awful lot of others.
Thanks, Rob. Did you have a follow-up question?
I did. Thanks for that. And I'm also wondering about if there's any more detail you can provide in terms of what these road checks will look like for folks on the island, or I guess anyone taking the ferries. You've talked about on the highway, and you referenced it would be the same situation as it has been at the ferries. Can you expand on that? Is there going to be road checks if you pull up to Swartz Bay or in Nanaimo as well?
No. What has been happening right now is that ferries has been dealing with things. They have been asking, is this essential travel? And when they have been booking, when people book, they check a box that is essential travel. The police, whether it's RCMP on the island, for example, or in Delta or West Vancouver, their local detachments, those police will attend as required, and that's what's been taking place, and it's been working quite well so far.
Our next question comes from Victor Kaiser of Radio NL. Victor, please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for doing this. I was just kind of following up a little bit what Rob had asked you on the passengers, just being the fact that you're only checking the drivers. And if you could maybe expand on that a little bit more, because I didn't quite fully follow along with what you were trying to say as to why only drivers and not passengers, because I can think of several potential loopholes that people could cross over, saying it's essential travel for the driver and maybe the passengers are just tagging along.
The order was constructed on the basis of legal advice because it is taking place under the Emergency Program Act, under Section 10. That means we are giving authorities to the police that exist in other areas but not under this legislation. And so in ensuring that, one, it is constitutional and doesn't start to stray into what could be deemed to potentially be an investigation, for example, the safest and most appropriate way to deal with this is that the driver is the one that is being questioned and not the passengers. And as I said earlier, when the announcement was made, that we are taking the time to ensure that we are doing it right and that what we are doing is constitutional and legally correct. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing the way we're doing it.
Victor, did you have a follow-up question?
I do, yes. Kind of related to, I know we've asked you last week when we had you on just in terms of the border between Alberta. They had about 2,000 plus cases yesterday, and knowing that some of the areas in the Kootenays and Golden, I know, had some pretty high per capita spread of COVID-19. Is there ongoing discussions perhaps between your government and the government of Alberta to try and come to a point where maybe we could get that agreement that both provinces agree that there should be no interprovincial travel and actually be able to maybe enforce that as opposed to just telling people not to travel between provinces?
We monitor what's going on in Alberta very closely. What I can tell you is that you know, the issue of the border is a complicated one, but there will continue to be signage at the border warning people not to come to British Columbia. We will engage with media in Alberta to remind people that now is not the time to come to British Columbia unless it's for essential travel, and that even when they come for essential travel, they have to abide by all the rules and regulations and health orders that are in place here in British Columbia, and we will continue to be doing just that.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nick Johansson of Castanet. Nick, please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Just further to the Alberta question previous there, you said last week that the government's working with tourism operators to encourage hotels to cancel bookings from out of town. The president of the BC Hotel Association told me last week that it's not their job to police essential or non-essential travel, and that they wouldn't be encouraging hotels to cancel bookings. What's your response to that?
We've been working very closely with the Hotel Association, and we've got a really good relationship, and they have stepped up remarkably well. And their job is not to enforce, and we've never said it was, but they have been doing a remarkable job in explaining what those rules are. And many hotels, when people book, explain the rules, and then people have been canceling or rebooking. So we've got a really good relationship that's been going extremely well with the Hotel Association.
Nick, did you have a follow-up?
I guess further to that, is it up to hotels to be canceling bookings if they think that people are traveling from out of their region or from out of province?
As I've said, the hotel operators, their job is not enforcement, but I can tell you what they have been doing is they have been letting people know the rules, and people have been rebooking. And so, and the fact that we have brought in the financial supports for the hotel and tourism sector this past week has really been of assistance to them, and that we're really pleased with the way that they have been dealing with the pandemic and the health orders, because they get it. They know that we get people vaccinated, we bend the curve, we bring down the transmission of cases. That's better for their long-term economic future in this province. And we're going to continue to work with them, and we're going to continue to work to keep British Columbians safe.
All right, our next question comes from Les Lane of the Times Colonist. Les, please go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Minister, last year there were some briefings that referred to Google mobility data, and I don't know what that is exactly, but it was some measurement of how people were curtailing their activities. I haven't heard any reference to that lately. And is there any data that just gives an indication of what the travel patterns are doing generally? Like, what's the issue that these measures are trying to correct exactly?
Les, I'm the wrong person to ask about a term like Google mobility data. But what I can tell you is this. We know from the public health officer that travel spreads transmission. And that's why, the request was put in place to put in these travel restrictions between health authorities. Because we know in particular in the Lower Mainland there are a number of hotspots, and we have seen the growth in variants. And so that's what this is about. what we're also encouraged by is the fact that we have seen people, are not using the ferries as much, and that's on top of reduced capacity. So when you see, a decline of 30% last weekend and 40% in foot travel on top of reduced ferry capacity, that tells you that people are getting the message. They understand the need to stay local, and that's what we're trying to do. It's about keeping people safe, it's about stopping the spread of this transmission, and it's about getting people vaccinated.
Thank you. Les, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, the same kind of measure on the highways. Is there I asked for a traffic count last week on 2 random spots in BC just to see what it was doing. I didn't see anything conclusive in terms of the numbers. But are you looking at highway traffic measurements to determine how necessary this is in relation to the pandemic?
Well, we know that in this province, there's really, if you want to go into the interior and you're living in the Lower Mainland, you take the number 1, and then at some point, around the Hope-Chilliwack area, if you haven't planned it already, you're either going to go the Canyon route, you're going to go the Coquihalla, or you're going to go the Hope-Princeton. Those are the 3 main arterial routes that I bet you probably 90%, 95% of the people in this province take to go, into the Okanagan or up north. And so if you're going to put a road check to discourage non-essential travel, that's the best place to do it. And the RCMP will look for locations that are safe for their members, that are safe for their public, and that have access to turn people around. And that's where they'll go. And on top of that, there will be signs several kilometers ahead of time warning people, no essential travel. And by the way, there's a checkup ahead, and again, opportunity to turn around. So we believe that will have an impact. And that's what this is about. It's reducing unnecessary, non-essential travel.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Corey Sidaway of Czech News. Corey, please go ahead.
Hey there. I'm just wondering why enforcement at BC Ferries is being left really to BC Ferry staff, and as you said, local police forces as needed, and that specialized division used on the mainland isn't being assigned there.
First off, BC Ferry staff are not doing enforcement. They are, they do ask the travel if it's essential. It's the police that do the enforcement, and it has been working very well. The issues, Ferries has been dealing with many of these issues for quite some time because they have got to deal with the Transport Canada regulations that are in place around staying below deck. As well, we've seen on a number of occasions where Ferries has had to deal with people on the ship who decide that they're not going to wear a mask, and so either the RCMP on the island are waiting for them when the boat docks and they get off the boat, or it's the West Van Police or the Delta Police attend as required if the boat's has not left. So the Ferries has a very good system in place. We've been working very closely with them, and it's working well.
Corey, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I just want to touch on that as required notion. Is it going to be BC Ferries that makes that requirement, saying, "Hey, we need help here. Someone's here from out of the region"? What does that look like?
When there's an issue that BC Ferries believes requires the attention or the attendance of police, they have a protocol and system in place, and they notify the police, and the police respond very quickly.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Brishti Basu of Capital Daily. Brishti, please go ahead. All right. I think Brishti is no longer on the line. And so it looks like actually we have time for one more question. Last question is from Lindsay Kynes of the Times Colonist. Lindsay, please go ahead.
Oh, hi, Minister. So just to clarify, we won't see any of these road checks on Vancouver Island, correct?
Correct. It is on the major corridors. Now, that being said, I just want to make it clear to people that does not mean that you go from Victoria to Courtenay, or you go from from Nanaimo up to Port Hardy. It still means that those travel advisories that are in place by Dr. Bonnie Henry are still there, which means stay local, stay in your own community, and that is the best way to help prevent transmission.
Lindsay, did you have a follow-up question?
No, that's good. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.